back, my friends, to the Derate the Hate podcast. I am your host, Wilk of WilkWorld.com, and I am so incredibly grateful that you have taken the time to join me for another great episode. Here at the Derate the Hate podcast, we're all about bettering the world one attitude at a time. You know, we did not create the hate, but with your help, we can derate the hate. It starts with each of us as an individual. So what have you done today to make your life a better life? What have you done today to make the world a better place? Making your life a better life starts with individual accountability. How we act, how we react, no matter what happens to us, how we react to it makes the difference. Friends, one of the great things about a bad attitude is we as individuals have the power to change it. One great way to do that, share the Derate the Hate podcast. Share it with your network of friends. Get them to share it. Subscribe. Leave us ratings and feedback. Always greatly appreciated. And with that, let's go. Friends, I am so glad to tell you that we have another fantastic guest for you this week on the Derate the Hate podcast. This is the first of what I hope to be many great conversations that I get to have with MÓNICA GUZMÁN here on the Derate the Hate podcast. Now, MÓNICA is a bridge builder, a journalist and entrepreneur who lives for great conversations sparked by curious questions. MÓNICA is the director of digital and storytelling at Braver Angels, who many DTH listeners know is one of the very favorite organizations that I happen to be involved with. MÓNICA is a host of a live interview series at Crosscut and a co-founder of the award-winning Seattle newsletter, The Evergrey. She was a 2019 fellow at the Henry M. Jackson Foundation, where she studied social and political division, as well as a 2016 fellow at the Nieman Foundation for Journalism at Harvard University, where she researched how journalists can rethink their roles to better meet the needs of the participatory public. She was named one of the 50 most influential women in Seattle, served twice as a juror for the Pulitzer Prizes, and plays a barbarian named Shadrach in her Bestie's Dungeons & Dragons campaign. A Mexican immigrant, a Latina, and a dual U.S.-Mexico citizen, she lives in Seattle with her husband and 2 children, and is a proud liberal daughter of conservative parents. I will say it again, I am incredibly grateful that MÓNICA has taken the time to join me today, this week, to share with you all about her journey and her latest book, I Never Thought of It That Way. Such a great opportunity, such an incredible conversation. You're not going to want to miss it. Let's go. MÓNICA GUZMÁN, thank you for joining the Derate the Hate podcast. I very much appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, you know, I know we've both been involved in Braver Angels, and I know that we've probably been involved in a couple common conversations, but this is a real treat because this is my first time ever getting to speak one-on-one with you. So I am very grateful for that. And, you know, I've been thoroughly impressed with the work that you've done with Braver Angels and some of the videos and some of the interviews that I've seen you do. So, yeah, incredibly grateful to have you on the Derate the Hate podcast. It is a real treat. So let's start off, MÓNICA, by talking about Braver Angels a little bit. And where did your path begin with Braver Angels? When did you talk a lot about curiosity. When did you get really curious and want to start bridging that divide?
Yeah. I've been a journalist my whole career, and I take very seriously the idea of doing that service of helping people understand each other. To me, journalism, when it works, when it's responsible and awesome, that's what it's really all about. So sometime in the last, I don't know, few years, what I had always detected, which is that, you know, the stories we tell tend to divide into different audiences, that the digital space has allowed different media to speak to very different people and build loyalty and build loyalty and build loyalty. You know, that this sort of baseline distrust and suspicion had really been growing and growing and growing. And after the 2016 election, it really hit this awful place, I thought, where as a journalist, I couldn't turn away anymore from the fact that it didn't seem possible to tell stories about people that could actually reach and be heard and understood by everybody, or at least everybody across a large political spectrum. And I hadn't thought of it as too much of a pressing issue before then. I knew that trust is obviously a huge thing, and we always need to work on it. But man, after the election, I just thought, if I continue to just do journalism, and keep doing this, I'll keep like seeing my stuff kind of go up and then hit this wall and then deflect. And I don't want to do that anymore. It feels like instead what I should do is figure out what's going on. What's keeping us from seeing each other? What's making us so afraid and deeply suspicious? And that was really the driving question, informed by the fact that I have this relationship with my parents. We're very divided politically, where even though we're super separate in our politics, we've been able to learn from each other and have really heated conversations that don't burn us. And so all of that just led to a bunch of questions about how do we do this?
For sure. I know a lot of people, not a lot of people personally, but I know a lot of people, and I've heard a lot of stories recently, after the 2016 election, and then, certainly even now after the 2020 election, where people, family members, loved ones, that just don't talk to each other anymore. They've allowed that bridge, that bridge to be a unbridgeable canyon, so to speak, because of the political differences, and mostly it's because of the discourse. People lost their ability to speak to each other, and so this unbridgeable canyon, they've lost their way, they've lost the ability to talk to each other, and there's any number of reasons for that. You talk about being a journalist and being in journalism, for a long time now, and that's your career. And I know totally what you're talking about when you talk about deflecting one way or the other, because it seems like so much of the media and so many journalists now, they feel like they have to pander to one side or another, or they just go for particular groups. Instead of trying to go for that broad political spectrum and try to talk to everybody, they know that the demographics are split now, and they know that they either have to go one way or another because they're not going to grab that big group. And that's very sad, because we used to live in a world where the information would just be put out there and it was for everybody, and then people could decide for themselves, how does this relate to me? What does this mean? And it was just the facts, ma'am, kind of thing. We got the information, we decided for ourselves, and we lived our lives. And now it seems like so much of the information that we get is either geared towards the right or geared towards the left.
Yeah, a big issue I see is about language. So, the more time that people spend talking to a certain set of people, they only interact with those sets of people. They only interact with those. Give that enough time and people will develop their own language, right? Like if you're in a group of friends, you have inside jokes, you have slang, you have phrases and things that mean something to you because you've been sharing an experience and a certain way of seeing things. That works writ large as well. So I think one of the bigger problems that we don't often think about is that because so many of these media have found their loyal audiences and they have split themselves off based on political ideology and the emotions in their audiences that relate to all of that, it also means that they've developed different languages, which then becomes complicated when anyone from one of those media silos wants to talk to someone from the other media silos. They'll use a word that to that other group is really different, really charged, what have you. And I've also noticed that happen. Our language has become so divided. And so it just gets harder and harder the longer we go without solving this.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, one of the best lines, well, not one of the best lines, there's an incredible amount, we're going to talk a little bit about your book, obviously, but in the intro to your book, one of the lines that I really liked right off the bat that grabbed me is, It says, if there's one thing that most people on the left and the right can agree on, it's that the way we treat and talk to the other side is broken. And I think it's very true.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and another thing that you talk about at length in the book is the sorting, othering, and siloing. And I think that that's incredibly important for people to realize just what you were saying there, in that when all you listen to is the people that think like you,
Mm-hmm.
that's where those silos really begin. That's you begin to tune out everything else. So talk a little bit about that, Monica.
Yeah.
That sorting, othering, and siloing with the way that we just listen to those who think like us.
Yeah. And each of those three things are perfectly human parts of our lives. And they even have good sides. So sorting is when we want to be around people who are like us. We group ourselves that way. It happens in a bunch of perfectly normal ways. It's how we build communities. It's how we find a lot of meaning in our lives, knowing who's with us, who's like us. So, okay. But then you've got othering. Othering is these sets of behaviors that we do whenever we detect that we are different from someone else. So there's a question in the book, can there be an us without a them? And it does sometimes feel like the way that the us's of the world form is in part by knowing who the them is, who the other is. Again, very normal part of life, but it can combine into this perfect storm of division. And then finally, siloing. Siloing is, what do we tend to hear? What do we surround ourselves with? What's coming in our social media feeds? Who do we hear on our phones, etc.? And technology has given us these incredible ways, very granularly, to select who we listen to, who we don't listen to. We're still exposed to voices that disagree with us, but usually through the filter of someone on our side who has already judged them or has already deemed them unworthy or is mocking them or whatnot. So we just have to be conscious of the fact that that's going on. So that's the sorting, othering, and siloing. That's the SOS, the call for help of this moment that we're in. And like you said, we start to tune out ideas and perspectives that are not ours. But even more significantly, it's not even so much that we tune them out. It's that we stop thinking that there's validity to them. That if there's validity to something, we think it has to be in the walls of our own silos, that we already identified it. And so everything outside, it doesn't add up, and we start to think things like, those people are idiots. Those people are crazy. Those people are bad people. And it's those three things that we tell ourselves about others that we don't actually even know. We rarely interact with meaningfully to understand what the perspective is all about, where people are coming from.
Yeah, and I think social media and their algorithms and the way that they do things. I mean, I don't know, anybody who's listened to me for very long knows that I call social media this dumpster fire of hate, lies, and misinformation. Yeah. And the thing is it's a perpetual cycle on their part, because you're very right. It gives people exactly what they're looking for all the time. And through those algorithms, they just keep on seeing the same stuff. They don't see a lot of an outside perspective. And then all of a sudden, when that does present itself, it is very much that's a them thing, and just like, just like my friend Daryl Davis said in a recent conversation that we had, is once they become them, and this is not exactly what he said, but once it's a them thing, and we don't know a lot about them anymore because we've put them in some other box. Now we're ignorant of what them is. So that ignorance leads to fear. That fear leads to anger. Now we've got hate. Now it can manifest itself into other things. And this isn't something that's exclusive to the right or exclusive to the left. It's just human nature.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's exclusive to humans.
It's exclusive to humans. That's right.
Yeah.
We become ignorant through our own actions and through the actions of the algorithms in social media. We become ignorant to the other side because we aren't exposed to it anymore. And with more and more people getting social life from social media and less interaction with real people, well, that ignorance just actually grows instead of the other way around.
Yeah, basically we're judging each other more and engaging each other less, which makes our judgments reckless.
That's right. That's right. And it is reckless. It is reckless because, the less interaction we have. There was a speech, I believe it was a TEDx speech that you did at some point. I remember, I think the quote was something to the effect of those we engage with the least. You say it. I'm sorry.
Whoever is underrepresented in your life will be overrepresented in your imagination.
That's absolutely right. One of the most profound and incredible statements that I've ever heard. And that's exactly right. And that goes to just like what I was just saying about that conversation with Daryl Davis, how he's been able to engage, several people, whether it be white supremacists or just people from all walks of life and turn the lives of those people around just by breaking through that barrier of ignorance. Right. and doing those things and getting people to realize that we're all human beings and look at it from that pro-human perspective. So incredible. So let's talk a little bit more. Let's dive a little bit more, Monica, into the book. I never thought of it that way. And it's an incredible book. I haven't finished the whole thing, but I've read a lot of it. Not only is it an incredible book in the sense that the way that you tell a story, which you're a fabulous storyteller, and the way that in the book had a feel for me like it was almost like a fiction book, in that you really bring a story into a very important point and a very important thing that we're trying to convey to the world right now. But you do it in a way where you're actually engaging the listener and talking about stories, talking about your own life, talking about your own experience, and the way that you talk about having dinner with your family or sitting down or the car that you used to drive. I really love the engaging part of the book. And then I love the points that you make in the book as well. You bring a lot of facts into it. You obviously did a lot of research on the stuff that you talked about. So one of the big things that you talk about in the book is curiosity and how curiosity in one-on-one conversations can really make the difference. So talk a little bit about curiosity.
Oh yeah. I mean, when I set out to try to learn, try to understand, what do we do to get out of our own way? How do we really see and reach each other so that we can fix all this in our lives and in our society? The thing that I ultimately got to that felt the most delightful and powerful and promising was our own capacity to be curious. I ended up doing research into that. What the heck is curiosity? And I had thought of it my whole life as this almost like a thing you learn about in kindergarten, I learned to be curious and curiosity is fun. You learn and blah, blah, blah. But it actually, it is a tool and we can deploy it. We can use it whenever confusion is really hurting us. We can become curious and it's something we can do willfully and it's something we can exercise and do as a practice. I think some people think, some people are curious and some people are not. I don't believe that. I don't think that the evidence amounts to that. Curiosity is just something you do or you don't do, and anyone can be curious. So curiosity is active so long as we pay attention to a gap between what we know and what we want to know. And it could be as silly as, sitting with a group of friends and saying, oh, the guy in that movie, the guy in that movie. The guy in the movie, and somebody eventually has to take out their phone and find out who the guy in the movie is because you just have to know. So it's a compulsion. It's a craving for knowledge. But there are two things right now that we need to notice are getting in the way of curiosity. And the research into curiosity shows how this happens. One is fear. You can't wonder about something you think is out to get you. You know, it'd be silly to be curious about someone pointing a gun at your face. You run. You don't need to ask questions. You get the heck out, right? Because asking too many questions can slow you down if what you're trying to do is survive. And the other thing is certainty. So there's a bunch of research into what happens when we're stressed out, when we're anxious. If there's something we really need to know, when will the pandemic be over? When will the vaccine be available? When will the mandates go away? We want to get rid of, it's like an itch we need to scratch. And so when will these things happen? And it's sort of like this sense of agony. And when you want to know something out of a sense of agony, you will be motivated to just accept whatever answer comes if it gives you comfort. And so that's called manufacturing certainty, or the need for closure. The more anxious or afraid we are, the more that we have that need for closure. And so we'll reach for an answer. There's our favorite media source, a thought piece from somebody who's a commentator who we really love or respect or connect with. Well, they're telling us that those other people are terrible and are doing these things for this reason. Okay, he's right. I want nothing to do with those people. We're done. I've got my answer. I feel better now. I know who my enemy is, and I can go about my day. So that can be pretty dangerous, but that's what happens. So we also have to sort of understand that we're doing this to ourselves and to our own world, not because we're dumb or bad or crazy, but because we're all kind of scared, and there's a lot of wild stuff going on out there. And so we're doing our best, and our best, unfortunately, falls prey to these easy default behaviors that are really digging us into a deeper hole unless we get curious.
No, absolutely. And I think you're right. I think one of the big things that happens with our curiosity, and curiosity falls prey to our own seeking of affirmation, our own preconceived notions a lot of times.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the big problems, like you were just talking about. You're just listening to people that have the same mindset as you, and we kind of go back to that. And I think about a lot, and I talk a lot about the reticular activating system. I talk about it on my podcast quite often, and how we can only focus on so many things at any given time. So if we're constantly believing we're a victim, we're going to seek out things and find things that reaffirm for ourselves that we're a victim. If we think that side is bad, and they're always bad, and so then we're not going to see the good in them anymore, because we can only focus on so many things. Yeah. So the only thing that we're going to see when we see them is the things that reaffirm in our mind that they are them for a reason. We don't want to have anything to do with them because they are bad.
Yeah. Yeah. And we do that.
I think that is, and one of the biggest things, one of the biggest casualties of that thing in us is curiosity. Mm-hmm. It ruins our curiosity. It hurts our curiosity. I think it was you that was there. Did you talk about a curiosity muscle, or what was that?
There's another author who talks about it too, Ian Leslie. He wrote a book called Curious.
Okay.
Called Curious. But he talks about that too, that curiosity is a muscle, and that you have to kind of flex it to make it strong. And it becomes a mental habit.
That's right.
And it can start really small. It can start really simple, mostly by having curious conversations with yourself, checking yourself in the act of assuming something about someone you don't know, asking yourself, what am I missing? Recognizing that you're always missing something, especially when it comes to people who disagree with you and about whom you have very little understanding. You're always missing something. The bad idea is to think that you already understand, that you already know, that you have the motives and incentives of that other side totally down. You don't. You most likely absolutely do not. And so that openness to what we don't know, it can mean the difference between a conversation where we come in guns blazing, figuratively, and one where we're actually open to learning something and we're not just trying to prove something.
Right. No, one thing you said right there, Monica, is something that I think a lot of people forget, and that's, we can be having a conversation, and I can listen to what you're saying, and I can know you're wrong, but what I don't know is your motives.
Right.
You know,
Exactly.
and people mistake that a lot of times. They believe that because you're wrong on purpose, and they try to take that whole thing
Yes.
about motive and turn it into something bad.
Yeah.
And, you know, I may be right on something. I may know that I'm right, and I may know that you're wrong. But for me to believe in my mind that I know your motives for it is a big mistake that we make as human beings. And that's one of the
Absolutely.
biggest problems we have today with people that we disagree with, is trying to act as if I know what's in your heart. I know that the
Yeah.
reason you're saying this is wrong, and I know you're doing it on purpose because you have some ulterior motive in doing what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what suspicion is ultimately all about, where we think, you're being disingenuous, you're being a bad actor. I can't stomach even talking to you because I just don't believe that what you believe is in good faith anyway. And not to mention, I don't see the point in talking to you if I know you're wrong. That's the other mistake we make about the purpose of conversations across divides. A lot of folks are just like, well, if it's not about changing their minds, why would I bother?
Right.
And if during the conversation they don't bend on their conclusion that I think is so terrible, I wasted my time. But it's kind of what you said. It's like, I have spoken with people who have very different politics and also who believe things that I think are wrong. They have drawn conclusions that I believe are just wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't make our conversation about that.
Right.
We don't have to make the conversation about that. And I think we need to, you know, I think it sort of feels that way, that if I'm talking with someone who I think is just plain wrong, there's nothing else to talk about except how they're wrong. But that's not even a conversation, right? If you were to come in and say, you're wrong, I want to tell you why. I mean, first of all, it's just that person feels completely attacked.
Right.
Yeah.
They just shut down right
They
away.
just shut down and their shields go up. And then everything that you say after that is a performance and is about defense and offense. And nothing is actually about exploring and understanding. So when I do talk with folks who hold conclusions or views that I think are wrong, I ask them questions about the path they walk to those views, and I find a lot to agree on. I find a lot to connect on there. I should say connect, not agree. We find the common ground. I relate to their pain, and then I understand what might have drawn them to conclusions that to me seem wrong. But you know what? Something about the concern behind their conclusion is right. Something about what they think is wrong with the world or what they feel is not being acknowledged about their own experience is valid, is right.
Mm-hmm.
So then I learned that even though, okay, this particular conclusion I think of theirs is just wrong, I get this new kind of empathy but there's something unaddressed here. There's something people ought to be paying attention to. And instead, what we do is when we think, whole groups of people are wrong, we just dismiss them outright. And we think there's nothing to be done here. But that's not seeing people. And underneath all of our opinions are our concerns, and our concerns are valid. Our concerns come from our lives, and the better we hear each other on that, the better we understand the whole world, and the more effectively we can build a world that doesn't concern us quite so much.
Right. No, and that's one of the reasons, Monica, that I love Braver Angels so much, is because we are bringing people together that would probably never otherwise speak to each other. Or if they did, they aren't going to probably have the conversations that need to be had about topics that need to be talked about, and to not have those conversations in some instances is probably the right path, but in other instances, the conversations do need to be had.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that Braver Angels is an organization, and a lot of the organizations that I talk to, or people from organizations that I talk to on the podcast, are trying to get people to interact, whether it be, FAIR or Braver Angels or Beyond Barriers, or any number of different organizations that are out there trying to bring people, trying to build that that conversation and get people together. And then obviously within Braver Angels, the We the People's project that I'm personally involved in most, that gets right down to the basic level, the people that are often spoken of but never spoken to.
Exactly.
So they're getting a chance to get their voices heard on situations and on topics that that you'd probably never hear from them on in any other forum. Obviously Braver Angels, I'm sure you've probably heard of it, but I've not mentioned it necessarily on the podcast yet. But because of Braver Angels, I am involved in a project currently with a very high profile person. This gentleman is full on entrenched in the intelligentsia bubble of Washington, D.C. I am just a average everyday redneck from the Midwest. We have totally polarized views on the government's reaction to the pandemic, and we are engaged in a long-term project that will be made public here very soon. But having that conversation between those two diametrically opposed worlds and using curiosity, using the humanity in each of us to understand how the other one came to the beliefs that we've come to is so incredibly important.
Oh, it's so illuminating. And I just want to pause and say that the Working People's Project, absolutely one of the most exciting things that I think Braver Angels does. It's sad that it's so unique.
It is.
It's just, it just really gets me mad, but, but it exists and it's happening and you're part of it. And I brag about it all the time. and just, Braver Angels is one of, as you mentioned, many organizations that represent people from a lot of walks of life who are just saying in their own ways, enough. We're digging our own hole here. The common ground across all political ideologies is that nobody thinks this is working. Everyone knows, even if they prefer their own ways of seeing the world, they know that this is no way to interact. This is no way to have a society. Right? I think of the gap between the creative potential of all of us in the United States, just how much intelligence, how much capacity, how much creativity there is in all of us. And then how little of that actually comes out the other end of our governance process, whether it's local or national, but particularly national. I mean, our elected officials can't get anything done.
No.
And we tend to think, well, that's their problem. We're going to wait for them to fix it. No, it's not their problem. They reflect us. The media reflects us too. It begins at the grassroots. And that's one of the things that Braver Angels understands. And even though the criticism is, well, you can't scale these workshops, you can't give it to the whole country and millions of people at a time. Well, you can't scale relationships either. The idea is for enough people to see someone on the other side as fully human in a way they hadn't before, and then take that learning into every conversation they have after that. It scales at the level of a human life. And then everyone that those people interact with, when they hear a kind of oversimplification or stereotypes, they can say, you know what? I don't know, man. I think maybe we've got this wrong or we're missing something. So I love that that's what we do, because when we look to technology, when we look to the politicians or institutions to solve this, no, it's our problem.
No, I know. And that's, one of the things that you also talk about in the book is you suggest that no politician or institution or governing body is going to fix this. It's the one-on-one conversations. And, going to what you just said is our governance process, the way that our politicians represent us, I believe is broken. Yeah. It is broken. And it is going to take one-on-one conversations. It is going to take us getting out there, neighbor and neighbor talking again, just like we were talking about earlier in this conversation, getting out and really engaging with people and not living your life in this online internet ecosystem, but engaging with your neighbors. And one of the things that, whether it be FAIR or Braver Angels or whoever, I think the thing that's so important there, and then, the Working People's Project, the We the People's Project now, I think the reason that is also very important, Monica, is to get people engaged again, because that governance process that we talk about being broken is broken for a reason. It's because people become less engaged. They became less engaged. They were not getting the attention that they felt they deserved, and they were not getting anything done. That's one of the reasons that we ended up with Trump and then now Biden, is because people were so disgusted that they went from one extreme to the other and whatever.
That's a good point.
The Working People's Project is getting people at the most ground level involved again. And one thing I like to say a lot is that those who govern closest govern best.
Yeah.
So the Working People's Project is getting people that have never or are very seldom heard from involved again. And they can get involved with their local person. And their local person may have a bigger voice or a bigger platform than they do. And each level of that platform gets bigger and bigger. And that's how we build it. It can be scaled, because as long as people at the lowest of levels get involved, and we can build that group, build that involvement, that can be scaled, and we can get them. It may not be a matter of them being involved personally with their congressman or their senator on a national level, but it may be them having a beer on their front porch with their local senator or their local congressman or their local assemblyman or whatever, and building that camaraderie and getting involved that way. And I think that's so important, because, again, no governing body is going to do it. Let's face it, our national government, the people that get all the mic time are the people that want to be celebrities. They want to get out there. They say these bombastic and hyperbolic things because it gets them more camera time. Yeah. And they really, our government on a national level, I think, spends more time trying to fix problems that they created. Yeah. And get time on air to make a big statement. But books like this, Braver Angels or organizations like Braver Angels, is getting people involved again, building that curiosity that you talked about.
Yep. Yeah. And hopefully, within the political institutions too, Braver Angels has an initiative called Braver Politics that we're about to launch in a really big way at the end of this month. And that's taking all of this, the trainings, the workshops, the habits, the lessons, to elected officials at the state level, at the local level, at the national level. And that's wild. Like that is something that, frankly, I thought, either wasn't going to happen or wasn't really possible. We would just have to stay grassroots. But I have to tell you, like, having talked to, sitting members of Congress about our programs and everything, the most encouraging thing is how much they want it. I think it's easy to watch our TVs and watch some of the more bombastic politicians do what they do, and then other them too, right? And color all politicians with the same brush. And it's just not true. It's just the ones that are really wanting to change things, they can't really talk about it because nobody cares, right? The media, whatever. They don't get a lot of attention for it yet, but they will. But they are talking to each other. They're talking to their constituents. They're learning about us and many other organizations. And they know that this is the deep down root of what's in the way and what's causing our dysfunction. What I'd love is to build a culture that supports them, because right now it's not there. They have to do it kind of hidden away. They have to beg for attention on these kinds of efforts, even though I think if you were to poll every, US citizen, everyone would agree that this needs to be fixed.
Right.
So it's kind of remarkable, isn't it, that
it is.
It's not easier.
It is, and I think it's important. But like I said, I think it's the bombastic ones. I say it a lot. Those who know the least say it the loudest. I think those division sells. Division sells. Our media feeds on that. So they get those that are the most divisive. Yeah. They get those that are the loudest and going to say the most bombastic things and give them the airtime. And I think you're right. Those that are really in the trenches trying to make things happen, they do have to keep their head down. And that is a terrible shame. Yeah. That is a terrible shame. They don't get the following. They don't get the attention. They don't get the media time that they deserve, because division sells soap. And and it hurts a lot. It hurts a lot for the journalism profession. It hurts a
Yeah.
lot, when it comes to the good politicians that are out there, the real victims of the whole thing. And I don't like the word victim, but the real losers in the whole thing is us as Americans,
Yeah,
us as
absolutely.
American
Up and
citizens.
down. Everybody loses.
Yeah,
Everybody loses. The trick seems to be it's just there's so many incentives that keep it from seeming worthwhile for many people to work on this particular thing. It's like, no, they have to get their next big hit, their next big story. They've got to get the clicks. They've got to do whatever. Uh, you know,
yeah, no, I know it's crazy.
it
So,
is.
Monica, what practical tips, going back to the book and the
Hmm.
things that you teach in this book, and it is a learning book in my opinion. People can learn a lot from this book. It's incredible. What are some practical tips that people can use when they're engaging those who they disagree, or whether it may be a family gathering? We've got the Easter holiday coming up. Families are
Mm.
going to be getting together, and what are some practical tips people can use to engage those that they know there's some animus, whether it be political animus or anything else in life for that matter?
Mhm.
What are some practical tips that they can use that they could learn in this book? I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, well, one is to share your opinions as a snapshot of what's in your mind instead of as the way it is. You know, we tend to think that if we share our opinion with a lot of confidence, we're strong, we're good. And if we share our opinion loosely, we're weak, we're unconfident, we are begging to be attacked. But I think in some ways the opposite is true. That I think we can be really, really strong in a conversation when, someone brings up, let's go somewhere, tough, like abortion, right? And like, okay, this comes up. And you could choose to say, whatever opinion you say, like, it's got to be pro choice. There's no other way. Like pro choice is the way it has to be, or whatever. The life of the baby. Um, what I like to say is more like, here's how it sits in my mind right now. Here's, when I think about it, here's what comes up for me. La di da di da. Here's what I believe. And when you present your opinion in that flexible way, it's what you believe, but you're also being honest about, I don't know. I mean, it's what I believe now. Maybe it wasn't what I believed when I was a kid. Maybe it'll change later. You model that for everybody else, and it starts to kind of catch like wildfire. And other people will use that language too. I was like, when I think about it right now, this is what comes up for me. Or like this is what I'm feeling now about it. This is what worries me now about it. So even putting it in those contexts will just loosen up a conversation and make it less about, this is what I think, and if I say it really strongly, I'll win. And like,
Mm-hmm.
no, that doesn't need to be it at all. It's strong when we can learn from each other. And another thing is asking how and not why. We tend to get really stuck on reason. And I know that sounds really weird. Well, everything should be reasonable, everything is logical and rational. But no, a lot of our beliefs are based on our concerns. They're based on how things sit with us. And we may not have reasons, that we can necessarily explain. And so a lot of times we get stuck at the level of logic and reason. And then we miss what's really going on, which is, some kind of lack, some kind of human reaction to something that's going on. So instead of asking people, why do you believe what you believe? Ask them instead how they came to believe what they believe. And that way you get people to tell you their story, to kind of give you almost a tour of the paths that they walked, the scenes that come up for them. Well, I remember when I was a kid, I saw someone get mugged. And I just like, I'm not going to get caught without a gun, whatever it was. Those kinds of experiences, when we share them with other people, and social science shows us this, it's a lot more powerful to understanding to share a story, something that happened to you that is part of why you believe what you believe, or what your opinion is. It's a lot more powerful than lining up the talking points and trying to do a little shootout with those.
Right. Yeah. No, I think it's very important. So what I'm hearing in what you're saying there is you almost want to be a model in engaging with somebody, be a model for the way that you want to be engaged. And
Yeah. That's a
yeah,
beautiful way to put it.
I like that. I like that a lot. And I think it's important because, again, especially, well, I think about the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale
Mm-hmm.
Carnegie,
Mm-hmm.
and he talks a lot in that book about maybe not even in terms of curiosity, but be a good listener, listen to the person and find out how that person came to be what they're believing. A lot in very similar terms to what you're saying is not just simply why. Don't give me just all the reasons, but how did this affect you? How did you come to this conclusion? And then it's not them trying to justify their opinion so much as feeling like they're heard, feeling like they're understood, feeling like, okay, they genuinely want to know how I came to believe what I believe. Not just the big reasons. And I love that. So be a model in your engagement in how you want yourself to be engaged.
And you know what I just realized too, and this is not something I've thought about much until just now, is this also just makes for far more fun and delightful conversations. It's the difference between reading a textbook and watching movie. Like when you watch a movie, there's drama, there's emotions you can connect with, there's pain, there's the experience someone else went through, and then you tell them what you went through. And it's a whole different kind of conversation than, here's the textbook with the mathematical formula and it adds up to this and it can't add up to anything else. Don't you agree? Like that. It's sort of, it's not a lot of fun. And you don't learn a lot that way. You just feel kind of put on the spot. That I will say though, that kind of, debate is really cool and really fun. It just doesn't work very well when there's so little trust. So in really low trust environments, when there's lots of suspicion, it's a lot better to work on building the trust by really listening to each other and trying to see each other as people. And then as you build that trust, you do also build the capacity to then go back and have the kind of conversations where you really can, as I sometimes tell my parents, that's wrong, you're wrong, and I'll get all into it. But it works only because we really see each other. We know that no matter what comes up in that conversation, it's not going to hurt us. And that's a pretty amazing place to be. But it takes a little time to get to that place where you can just let loose and get mad and know that you're not going to burn anything. You're just cooking something.
No, that's exactly right. No. And going back to your movie analogy, I mean, how much better is a movie when you actually get to find some personal or relatable thing to you in that person in the story, right? How much more engaged are you? How much more willing are you to be sympathetic to that person once you can find something relatable to you in that person?
Yeah.
Instead of just, well, why'd you come up with that?
Yeah.
Or why do you think of it that way?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
yeah. There's some magic moments that happen there because then you can ask yourself, as you hear about someone else's path to their view, you start to see the points where you might have branched off. Like, if that had happened to me, I think I would have had a different reaction. Interesting. Yeah. And then you could get curious. Why would I have had a different reaction? Well, maybe it's because of this value that I hold in a different way or what have you. And you start to, that's the other really beautiful thing about this is you learn in a lot of ways more about yourself than the other person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, without a doubt. That's incredible. And so, Monica, if you had to choose one, I don't know if a topic, but lesson in your book, I never thought of it that way. If you wanted to pick one thing out of that book that you would, above all things, and there's so many lessons in the book, but what is the one lesson that you want everybody to get out of this book?
I think right now what's coming up for me to answer that question is that the most important thing to do with a bridge is to keep it, not to cross it. And that if you are in a place where, oh man, yeah, this all sounds really nice for someone else, I can't do it, this is wild, then even the act of not burning a bridge, of not hurting not killing a relationship where it just feels too divisive, is already more curious than the alternative. If you leave that bridge open so that maybe someday you can cross it to that person can cross it to you, that is already kind of revolutionary. That is already making sure that we don't make bad things worse. If you have the courage to leave some of those bridges up, that is enough. So yeah, the most important thing to do with a bridge is to keep it, not cross it. We don't have to cross it on day one. We don't need other people to do everything on our terms. We can't control other people. So that's the courage of patience as well.
Patience, courage, curiosity. There's so much that can be learned from this book, Monica, and I'm so glad that we've had an opportunity to talk about it here on the Derate the Hate podcast. I know the listeners of the Derate the Hate podcast are going to see this as much a treat as I did. Having a conversation with you is a real pleasure, and I look forward to doing a lot more work with you in the future, whether it be Braver Angels, whether it be on the Derate the Hate podcast, any other thing we may end up involved in. It's you're a genuinely awesome person, and I love the things that you do. It's great. It's great.
Back at you. I'm so glad we're working together in the ways that we are. And to the next conversation. I can't wait.
Friends, there was so much value, so much importance, so many great things said in this conversation with Monica Guzmán. And I am, again, so grateful that I had the opportunity to sit down with her to talk about her latest book. I never thought of it that way. There's so many things that you can find out in the show notes about Monica, including where you can get the book, how you can contact her, and see some great quotes like this one. Those who are underrepresented in our lives will always be overrepresented in our imaginations. We talked a lot in this conversation about the fact that as we become more divided as a country, we learn less, we know less, we become more ignorant to what those that don't think like us think. As you know from other conversations that I've had on this podcast, the more ignorant we are of those with whom we disagree, the more fearful we are, the more angry we become, the more things become worse and worse. It's a perpetual cycle. It's a cycle that we have to break, my friends. It's a cycle that we do not want to continue. So we have to have those conversations. We have to be curious. We have to love our neighbor. We have to get out there and talk to one another and not simply spend all of our time in that internet ecosystem that is driven towards keeping us divided and keeping us mad and keeping us scared and all the other things that they do. Again, be sure to check out the show notes and share this episode and so many other great episodes of the DTH podcast with your network of friends. Friends, I just want to say again how very, very grateful that I am that you took the time to join me for another Derate the Hate podcast episode. Please share us with your friends, share us with your network. If you haven't done so already, subscribe and talk your friends into doing the same. Feedback and ratings, wherever you get your audio, always greatly appreciated. And with that, I will just say get out there, be kind to one another, be grateful for everything that you've got, and remember, it's up to you to make each and every day the day that you want it to be. Friends, if there was anything in this episode that provided exceptional value to you, I would love to hear about it. Email me, wilk@wilksworld.com, or hit me up on most social media platforms. With that, I am going to back on out of here, and we will catch you next week. Take care.